On the afternoon of June 15th, 2024, a 25-year-old named Shubham Manchanda walked down a hiking trail in the Niagara Glen the way a few 100,000 people do every summer. He had come to Canada from India 3 years earlier to study at Durham College, stayed on afterward, and built a life that looked, by every account from the people who knew him, steady and good. He was working in IT consulting in St. Catharines. Friends called him hardworking. Funny, the kind of person who talked about making his mentors proud and meant it. He loved nature, which is why he was on that trail in the first place, and he couldn't swim, which is exactly why he had no intention of getting anywhere near the water. Within the hour, he was dead. Not because he leaned over a railing for a photo, not because he attempted some daredevil stunt in a barrel, the way people occasionally still do here. He slipped on a wet rock near the riverbank, and a stretch of the Niagara River that most visitors never even hear about pulled him under before his own friends could reach him. This was not a freak accident. It fits a pattern. This stretch of water has been repeating for more than a century. More than 20 million people visit Niagara Falls every year, drawn to one of the most photographed sights on the planet. Ask almost any of them what's dangerous here, and they'll describe the same image: the brink, the mist, the railing, the drop, the tourist leaning out for one more picture. And they're not wrong that people die there. Niagara has a long, well-documented history as a place people go to end their own lives, which is a separate and serious subject on its own, not the one this video is about. But among the deaths that are genuine accidents, the ones that happen to people who never meant to be anywhere near danger at all, the brink of the falls is not actually where most of them occur anymore. The overlooks are some of the most heavily fenced, most heavily patrolled few hundred feet of shoreline in North America. The thing that kills unsuspecting people here is quieter, and it doesn't wait at the railing. It sits a few kilometers downstream, past the crowds, past the mist, in water that looks so calm in places you could talk yourself into believing you could stand in it. People who work this water put it more bluntly than any sign does. The falls have a fence. The river doesn't. It waits for you to walk down to it on your own. To understand how a place with paved trails, a gift shop, and a shuttle stop becomes somewhere that kills a careful 25-year-old who couldn't even swim and had no plans to get wet, you have to understand what is actually happening in the water below Niagara Falls and why it looks nothing like what it is. Everyone who has ever visited Niagara pictures the danger the same way. The mist rising off Horseshoe Falls, the railing at the brink, the sign that says, "Stay back, don't lean out, don't climb over for the photo." That image is so strong that it has basically become the entire mental model of what's dangerous here. And it isn't wrong, exactly. People do occasionally go over the brink, and when they do, it is almost always fatal. But it is rare, and it is heavily engineered against. The overlooks have solid railings. The most exposed points have fencing. Niagara Park's police patrol constantly. The falls themselves are, by design, one of the most supervised tourist attractions on the planet. The place that actually kills people is downstream, past the mist, past the crowds, where the river narrows and turns and the postcard ends. It's called the Whirlpool, and the stretch of river feeding into it, the Whirlpool Rapids, and the water doesn't announce itself the way the falls do. There's no roar you can hear from the parking lot. There's no spray hanging in the air. In long stretches, it looks almost flat. Green. Slow. the kind of water a person could imagine wading into on a hot day. This isn't a new problem either. In 1883, Matthew Webb, the first man to ever successfully swim the English Channel, a certified national hero in Britain, decided his next feat would be swimming through the Whirlpool Rapids. He was one of the strongest open-water swimmers alive at the time. He entered the river below the falls, in front of a crowd of onlookers, and by most accounts, made it through the worst of the rapids before the water near the whirlpool itself finished him. His body was found 4 days later. The inquest found that the sheer physical force of the current, not exhaustion and not drowning in the ordinary sense, was what killed him. That was over 140 years ago, and the fundamental lesson of that day, that the strongest human body on Earth is not a match for this stretch of river, has been proven over and over again since, on people with far less reason than Webb to think they were the exception. To understand why this piece of water behaves the way it does, you have to understand that the whirlpool is not a lake, and it's not some ordinary bend in a river. It's the site of a genuinely violent accident in the landscape's history, one that happened almost instantly compared to everything else that shaped this place. Niagara Falls has been retreating upstream for thousands of years, cutting backward into the rock as the water wears it away, inch by inch, foot by foot, century by century. Around 4,200 years ago, that slow retreat hit something unusual. An ancient, buried valley called St. David's Gorge, carved by a completely different river tens of thousands of years earlier, and later filled in with loose, glacial rubble. When the retreating falls broke into that old, soft, buried channel, the erosion that had taken thousands of years to accomplish elsewhere happened here in what geologists think may have been a matter of days or weeks. The river tore through the loose fill almost instantly, and because that old buried gorge ran at a completely different angle than the new one, the water was forced into a sudden, sharp, right-angle turn. That turn is the whirlpool. It's a basin more than 300 meters across, plunging to depths over 125 feet in the middle. And because the river has to make that hard turn through a bottleneck, the water above it and below it moves in some of the fastest, most violent whitewater on the continent, the Whirlpool Rapids, a mile of water officially classified by New York State Parks as Class 6, the top of the International Whitewater Difficulty Scale, meaning non-navigable, meaning no boat and no swimmer is meant to be in it under any circumstances. At the whirlpool itself, the incoming current runs up against water that's already spinning, and rather than mixing cleanly, the flow gets shoved underneath itself, driving the vortex you can see from the overlooks. When water levels shift, which they do constantly, because so much of the river is diverted for hydroelectric power, the whirlpool can even reverse direction. None of that is visible if you're standing on a rock at the shoreline, looking at what appears to be an inviting patch of green water 30 feet away. It's the same trick every dangerous piece of water plays. The surface tells you almost nothing about what's happening underneath it. A stretch of river can look glassy and slow on top, while moving with lethal force a foot below the surface, because the geometry of that hard-turned gorge is doing something to the water that has nothing to do with what it looks like from a rock ledge. This is where the psychology of the place becomes as important as the geology. At most dangerous landmarks, the danger and the barrier line up. Stay behind the fence and you're fine. Here, they don't. The line that actually matters isn't a distance you have to travel or a height you have to lean over. It's a boundary you can cross in a single step, in a spot with no railing at all, and almost nothing marks where it is. The falls have a fence. The river doesn't. The Niagara Glen trails are genuinely lovely. They're maintained, they're well within a normal hiker's ability, and they're free and open to anyone who wants to walk down through the Carolinian forest to the gorge floor. Nothing about that descent asks you to make a decision. You're not signing a waiver. You're not climbing over a barrier. You're just walking a path that was built for exactly this purpose, and it deposits you at the edge of the river on real rock, close enough to touch the water. And that is the entire trap. The actual dangerous line in this story isn't the trailhead, and it isn't the gorge rim. It's the transition from standing on the rocks to stepping into the river. That line has almost no friction to it. There's no gate. In most places, there's no fence. The trail already did the hard work of getting you right up next to the water, so getting in, to cool off, to get a better photo, to see how it feels, reads as a small, casual next step, not as the actual point of no return that it is. People don't think of it as entering one of the fastest, most technical whitewater stretches in North America. They think of it as wading in at the edge of a river on a hot day, the same instinct that would be perfectly safe almost anywhere else. Once someone is in that water, the sequence that follows is fast and almost impossible to reverse from the outside. Here is what happens once you're in it. The Niagara River stays cold even in the middle of summer, fed by the depths of Lake Erie upstream. And the moment you go under, cold shock hits first. An involuntary gasp reflex, your heart rate spiking, a wave of genuine physiological panic that you cannot simply will your way through. That alone can be enough to pull water into your lungs in the first few seconds. If you get past the gasp, the current is waiting right behind it, and it is the real problem. You are not swimming against an ordinary river. At its narrowest, fastest points, this stretch of the Niagara has been clocked at close to 30 miles an hour, faster than an Olympic swimmer's top sprint speed, sustained indefinitely, with no lane to climb out of. Your swimming ability, in the conventional sense, stops mattering. You are not outswimming this current. It decides where you go. From there, the pattern repeats in case after case. Panic, involuntary breath-holding failure, submersion, and a body carried downstream faster than anyone on shore can move to follow it. There's a second, crueler pattern buried in the record here too. The failed rescue. Again and again, the person who dies alongside the original victim isn't a stranger. It's the friend who went in after them. On August 1st, 2021, a 22-year-old woman from Toronto was hiking the gorge trails near the Niagara Glen with a group of friends when she and a 27-year-old friend went into the water together. When she began struggling in the current, he went in to help her. He disappeared within moments. Police, aided by Niagara jet boats, managed to pull the woman from the river and attempted to resuscitate her, but she died in hospital. Her friend's body wasn't recovered until days later, 10 kilometers away, out in Lake Ontario. The current had carried him the entire length of the lower river and out into the lake before anyone found him. One rescue attempt, 2 deaths. Even if you're lucky, even if someone sees you go in, even if help is close, and at Niagara, because of the tourist volume, it usually is close, the water itself can still defeat the rescue. This stretch of the Niagara River happens to sit directly on the international border, splitting the current down the middle between Ontario and New York State. That geography, which is a quiet historical footnote most of the time, becomes an active mechanism working against you the moment someone is swept into the current. A real rescue here can mean coordinating Niagara Parks Police, Niagara Regional Police's Marine and Dive Units, the Ontario Provincial Police Helicopter, the Canadian Coast Guard, and the United States Coast Guard, all in the same operation, on the same river, across a border that doesn't slow the water down even slightly, but absolutely can slow down who's allowed to do what and where. In the 2021 case, it took 5 separate agencies working together just to recover one body. In the Manchanda case, Niagara Regional Police described the search as extensive and exhaustive, air, land, and water, and it still wasn't enough to bring a resolution in time for his family to fly in and be there when it happened. And that's assuming the current cooperates at all. The same police spokesperson who confirmed the search for Manchanda had been suspended pointed to the vast area of water and the unpredictability of the environment as the reason. That's not a euphemism. The current in the whirlpool and the rapids around it disperses and holds what it takes, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, spreading a search area out over kilometers of river, and, eventually, out into Lake Ontario itself. A fast response from 5 agencies with a helicopter overhead does not mean a fast recovery. In this river, it often just means a fast, well-documented failure. This isn't a rare event dressed up to look common. The company that runs jet boat tours through these rapids has said its own crews have been pulled into dozens of rescues and recoveries over the years. Hikers and fishers who slipped on wet rock or went into water they didn't understand the speed of. Most of those calls end with someone alive. Some of them end the way Manchanda's did, which brings the story back to where it started. Shubham Manchanda slipped from a rock near the whirlpool on a Saturday afternoon hike, doing something no different from what thousands of visitors do every week. He wasn't attempting anything. He wasn't ignoring a posted warning. A witness on the trail that day, a hiker named Jason Herterick, said he heard shouting and saw someone being carried down the river before he even understood what he was looking at. That's how fast it happens. Fast enough that a bystander's first understanding of the event is watching it already be over. For nearly a week, his name existed only as a man presumed dead in police statements. Marine units searched, aircraft searched. The Canadian Coast Guard joined in. And then, before his brother could even get a flight out of India, before the family understood anything beyond missing, Niagara Regional Police suspended the formal search, not because they had an answer, but because the river had made it impossible to keep looking. His friends turned to social media, begging people to keep his name out there so the search wouldn't be allowed to quietly end. His childhood friend, Manish Arora, who had known him since they were 10 years old, growing up in the same neighborhood in India, spoke about a young man who would have done very, very big things in his life. It took 5 more days after the search was suspended before a body was recovered from the lower river. His brother Ayush and that same childhood friend were the ones who eventually had to fly to Canada, not for a visit, not for a graduation, but to identify a body and arrange for cremation, thousands of kilometers from home. The man who mentored him at a renovation company he'd worked for called him dedicated, hardworking, family-oriented, and someone who didn't take himself too seriously. The kind of person who would joke about going out for a good time in the same breath as talking about his future. That's the profile of almost every name that turns up in this river's history. Not reckless people. Not people doing something obviously dangerous. People standing where thousands of others stand every week, on a day when the current happened to be exactly as strong as it always is. and the rock happened to be exactly as slick as it always is. Manchanda wasn't the first, and given how this stretch of river has behaved for more than a century, he almost certainly won't be the last. Go back to July 1972, before there was even a hiking trail warning sign to ignore. A tour company had just started running rafts of tourists through the Whirlpool Rapids, life vests on, trained crew aboard. A wave the size of a small building flipped one of the earliest trips, and 30 people went into the water. 3 drowned: Julia Martinez and David Ross, both of Toronto, and Anthony Sawchik of Niagara Falls, New York. They weren't hikers who wandered too close. They were paying customers on what had been sold to them as a guided, supervised ride. Go to July 2013, and a 23-year-old man from Amherst, New York, was hiking with friends at Whirlpool State Park, the American mirror of the Niagara Glen, directly across the gorge, when he slipped and fell into the lower river. His body was recovered from the water days later. Go to August 2021, and you have 2 people in their 20s, a woman and the friend who went in after her, both gone within the same hour, on the same trails that lead down into the Niagara Glen. Go to June 2024, and you have Shubham Manchanda. Go to July 2025, 1 year later, and you have Cameron Stenzel, 15 years old, fishing with his father in that same stretch of the lower river. He slipped on the rocks and disappeared into the current while his father was standing right beside him. His body was found days later, carried more than 15 kilometers downstream to the shoreline at Niagara-on-the-Lake. A raft full of tourists in life vests, a hiker on an afternoon walk, 2 friends on a hot day, a man who couldn't swim and had no plans to get wet, a boy fishing beside his own father. What connects these cases isn't recklessness, it's proximity. Different decades, different reasons for being near the water, different relationships to the river entirely, and the same current, the same outcome every time. Sometimes the gap between the 2 lists, the ones who lived, the ones who didn't, comes down to almost nothing, and it happens in this exact stretch of water, not at the falls. In 2011, a woman named Lindsay Burgess was hiking with her fiancé in the Devil's Hole area of Whirlpool State Park, the same gorge, the same rapids that took the Amherst hiker and would later take Manchanda. She reached down toward the water. "I just wanted to touch the beauty," she said afterward. She slipped on the rocks and the current took her, the same way it took all the others. Her fiancé watched from the shore, unable to reach her. What saved her wasn't caution, or fitness, or anything she did differently in the water. It was luck. A jet boat captain happened to be passing at that exact moment, spotted her in the current, and pulled her out with his crew. 12 years later, a different woman went into that same stretch of river and managed to grab hold of a rock 15 feet from shore, clinging to it until firefighters could reach her with a ladder. Both of them lived. Manchanda didn't. The difference wasn't what any of them did differently. It was whether someone happened to be close enough at the right second to reach them. And the broader numbers back up what these individual stories suggest. The Life Saving Society's Ontario Drowning Research found that 2020, the same province, the same kind of water, had the highest number of drowning deaths on record in the province, 211 in a single year, with men accounting for the overwhelming majority of victims, and a significant share of those deaths involving people who weren't even swimming. They were walking, standing, or playing near the water when it took them. That statistic matters here specifically because it confirms what the Niagara cases already show. You don't have to intend to get in the water for the water to be the thing that kills you. This river doesn't hate the people who die in it. It's simply too old, too vast, too indifferent to know or care that a person standing on a wet rock has a life waiting for them on the other side of it. The Whirlpool doesn't know that Matthew Webb was a national hero, or that a 27-year-old man was trying to save his friend, or that a 25-year-old was 3 years into building a life in a new country. It has been making that same violent turn through that same broken elbow in the landscape since roughly the time the first pyramids were being finished, and it will keep making that turn long after every name in this story is forgotten. It doesn't accelerate for tourists, and it doesn't slow down for good intentions. That indifference is exactly what makes the place so dangerous to a species that is built to read danger visually. Humans are extremely good at fearing things that look scary. A sheer cliff, a roaring waterfall, white water crashing over rocks. We are much worse at fearing things that look calm. And the Niagara River, in the stretches where it actually kills the most people, spends long sections looking almost perfectly calm. The postcard water at the brink of the falls has never needed a warning sign to be convincing. It already looks lethal. The water 30 feet from a hiking trail in the Niagara Glen doesn't look lethal at all. And that gap between appearance and reality is the whole mechanism. So picture it. You've parked near Whirlpool Road. You've walked the short, well-marked path down into the gorge, and the forest opens up in front of you the way it does for every hiker who's ever taken this trail. The river is right there, close enough that you can hear it, close enough to see the current moving. In places, it's whitewater, churning, and obviously fast. But a little further along, it flattens out, turns that deep, clear green you've seen in 100 photos, and it looks, for all the world, like something you could step into. There's no fence here, no lifeguard, no sign at your exact feet telling you this specific patch of rock is where people have died. Just water, and the ordinary human instinct to get closer to it on a warm day. The same instinct that's completely harmless at 1,000 other rivers and lakes. Nothing about the moment feels like a decision with consequences. That's the trap closing. The same way it closes on someone who tells themselves they'll only go to the next viewpoint before turning back. Except here, the moment isn't a mile down a trail you'll have to climb again. It's a single step off a rock, and by the time the current tells you the truth about how fast it's actually moving, you are no longer the one making decisions. Every name in this story had a moment where the water was still just something to look at. Matthew Webb had it before he dove in on purpose. The tourists on that raft in 1972 had it while they were still buckled into their life vests. The woman and her friend in 2021 had it before either of them got wet. Shubham Manchanda had it standing on a rock, on a hike, with no intention of swimming at all, right up until the instant his footing gave out. None of them were fools. They were hikers on a legal trail, on a nice day, standing where the park itself invites people to stand. The tragedy isn't that they made some obviously terrible choice. It's that the choice that mattered, how close is close enough, never announced itself as a choice at all. Niagara Falls will keep drawing millions of visitors a year to stand behind its railings and watch the most famous drop of water in the world, and almost all of them will go home exactly the way they arrived. The falls have a fence. The river doesn't, and it never has needed one because the river convinces you a fence was never necessary in the first place. The falls with all their noise and spray and crowds, have never needed to be feared quietly. They already look like exactly what they are. It's the water a few minutes downstream, green, wide, deceptively slow on the surface, that has spent over 4,000 years proving it doesn't need to look dangerous to be the part of Niagara Falls that actually kills you. The falls announce themselves. The river never does.